In the last lesson, we have covered the use of the null value in the TypeScript language. Let's now cover a feature that is very tightly related to null, which is called optional chaining. To understand why optional chaining is useful, let's go ahead and let's define here a new object in our program. Let's add here a new property, the title property to the object, and let's fill in here some value. Now we're going to go ahead and we are going to test to see if the title property is filled in. So we are going to access here the course.title property, and if the title is filled in, let's go ahead and let's print it out to the console. We are going to use here a template string and say that the title is, and we're going to add here the course title. If we compile this program and we run it, we're going to see that everything is working correctly. So the title gets printed out here to the screen as expected. But imagine the situation where this course object is not yet known in the program. Imagine that this value is still initialized to null and we haven't received the object yet. Maybe the object is coming from the backend, from a database, and the loading operation has not completed yet. And by some reason, someone clicks on a click handler and this code gets executed while the course is still null. If we now run this program again, we're going to get a very different output. So as we can see, we get here a type error, cannot read properties of null. And if you are curious and you still remember of our null versus undefined lesson, if we run the same program and you use the undefined value instead, we're going to get here the same type error, but this time around we get cannot read properties of undefined. But as we have mentioned on the previous lesson, in these situations you always want to make sure that you use null to make it explicit that we know that this variable does not have a value yet. So in general, how do we avoid this type of problems in TypeScript? Well, usually what we do is we add here an extra check and we use here the AND operator to see first, is the course value truthy, and only if the course is truthy, then we are going to be executing this part here of the statement. So this operator here will only evaluate the conditions here to the right if the conditions to the left have been filled. So that's the shortcut property of the double AND operator, which works just like in the JavaScript language. So if we now run this program, we are going to see that no output is going to be produced, but we don't get an error either. So this is normal, the course is null, so this check here for the course variable returns false, and this is going to make this condition evaluate to false, and our logging statement will not be printed out as a consequence. As you can see, this is the typical way of solving this problem in plain JavaScript, and it works. But it's very verbose and it can lead here to conditions that are a bit harder to read. For example, if the structure of our object is a little bit more complex, like for example, let's say that the title is not here immediately available, but instead we have here an object property. For example, let's call this the text fields property, and inside it we have here another property title. Then in order for this to work, we would have to refactor this to check not only the truthiness of course, but we also have to check course.textfields, and then finally we need to check course.textfields.title, and we also need to fix here the print statement. So now our program would be correct again, and if we run it with a valid value, we are going to see that the title gets printed out correctly here to the screen. But if we again set this to null instead, and we go back and we try to run the program again, we're going to see that this time around everything is working. There is still no value printed out to the console because here the course property is falsy, it's not yet filled in. But look at this code, it's just not very maintainable, it's just not very easy to read, and this condition is going to get a lot worse if we include several fields for which we want to check the truthiness. So in order to simplify this type of expressions, TypeScript has introduced a new feature not present in the plain JavaScript language. So this is a TypeScript construct only, which is called optional chaining. So here, what TypeScript allows us to do is to use this operator here, the question mark dot operator. And this operator is only going to access this property if the property is defined, if there is a value to it. If this property here is not yet defined, if it's null, for example, then this attempt here of accessing the text fields property is not going to result in a type error. Let's quickly confirm that our program is correct. We are going to run this new version. So as we can see, no type error occurred. This is very promising. So now if we replace here the value null with this value here, let's see what happens this time around. So we're going to clear the output, run again the program, and now we get the title printed out correctly to the screen as expected. So as we can see, this optional chaining operator is very useful to conditionally access fields only if they are filled in. A question that you are probably asking yourself is, what is the exact value of this expression in the case when the course was null? So what would this expression be evaluated to? Let's find out. We are going to print this out here to the console using console log. We are simply going to print out the output of this expression, and let's go ahead and let's run this new version of our program. So if we run this, we're going to get here printed out to the console the value undefined. So this means that if the optional chaining operator does not find a value here in the next step of the chain, then the whole expression is going to be automatically evaluated to undefined. As you can see, the optional chaining operator is extremely useful for avoiding type errors in your program. Next, we are going to be talking about another very closely related operator, which is the null coalescing operator.